All right. All right, everybody, let's get going here. We have a number of bills, starting with House Bill 38. Delegate Moon, Majority Leader, are you here? Okay. All right, there he is. Hey, bud, you got a panel or just you?
Thank you, and Jamie Bridges from the IAC with me. They are here only in an informational capacity to answer questions.
Good.
Good afternoon, colleagues. House Bill 38 is a bill to ensure we are better stewards of school construction tax dollars and school construction resources. Essentially what this bill does is it tries to guardrail efforts by counties to deploy adequate public facilities ordinances, which are intended to make sure that as new development and housing comes online, you have the school capacity for those new units. But from where I sit, there's a lot of variation between the counties on how they approach this issue. And so again, this bill is trying to guardrail this process. Why? Because Maryland has a housing crisis, and 3 out of the last 4 years, the state population has been in decline. You have to go back a very long time to see Maryland's population in decline. And when you look at jurisdictions in Maryland, from Cumberland to Baltimore, that have witnessed an erosion of their tax base and a population decline, you can see how that starts to spiral into additional strain on the budget and additional strain on the fewer taxpayers and businesses that are left to hold the bag. So this bill does a few things. First, it tries to get at this problem of school systems politicizing how they use the seats that are available to them, and essentially being unwilling to use all of the seats available. If, say, you have 2 schools next to each other, one is over capacity and the other one is under capacity, you could adjust that through a boundary change. And if you don't do that, you collect a fee so that you build portables at the other school. One way or another, you have to address the capacity issue. What counties are doing instead is simply shutting down housing. I don't think that's a viable answer in today's housing crisis. And counties like Montgomery, where housing moratoria were deployed to shut down housing, have ended that practice and have sought alternatives such as better planning and impact fees to build portables or whatever you need to do. So the bill restores the IAC's power to withhold matching funds from school systems that are asking the state to pay for capacity enhancements at schools that are sitting right next to other schools that have available seats. Okay? It doesn't change how much any county gets in school construction dollars. It simply makes it not possible to get money for seats when that school system has available seats that they can use. In other words, we need to stop subsidizing politicized decisions by the counties. We don't have the resources for these kinds of games. The bill does a couple other things. It gives the IAC the school system's data on where each student resides without any identifying information, for the purpose that the IAC can essentially audit and call foul on whether school systems are or are not over capacity. So that it gives them more ability to audit the claims of the counties. Lastly, the bill has a reporting requirement also, and that might need some tweaking. The bill puts a 4-year cap on how long a adequate public facilities ordinance can shut housing down. And I want to just point a couple things out to you. The bill as drafted actually just extinguishes most county adequate public facilities ordinances that are older than 4 years old. That's a bit of a drafting error, though I think some people prefer that version of the bill. But it was intended to say, and I have a clarifying amendment, that essentially if a county is deploying an adequate public facilities ordinance that shuts down housing on the basis of school overcrowding, they have 4 years to deal with the school overcrowding, and that housing moratorium is lifted. I do think 4 years is a bit long, but that was the number where we wanted to start that conversation. So I'm happy to take any questions, and otherwise we've got folks on technical details from the IAC.
How does the bill define shutting down housing? I know Prince George's has like a surcharge they do.
It's defined as a adequate public facilities ordinance specific. In fact, I have to peep at what the exact language. Yeah, it's just that if the ordinance restricts housing development. And a number of counties, again, do this. And one important fact I omitted in this is that we now have 3 counties that have studied this issue, Howard, Anne Arundel, Montgomery, and all of them indicate that the surge in school enrollment is not coming from the new apartments or the new construction. It is coming from houses not occupied by people with children in the school system turning over and being rented to people with children that enter the school system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just looking at the opposition from MACO, and I don't know if they're testifying or not. They are? Okay, I'll reserve the question for them. They may be able to answer it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for bringing the bill. As a former school board member myself, I can attest to the reluctance to redistrict kids, although we did do it every year of my 4-year tenure there. But it is done less often now because of the organizing capabilities of parents to put the pressure on the school boards not to move children, and in some cases for good reasons. I guess my question for you is, how do you incentivize the school board, which is different than the county, and you're assuming that the bill's penalty, I guess, to speak with the IAC funding, is what will incentivize the school board to actually make those tough decisions?
That's a fair way of putting it. There are more aggressive approaches I had contemplated in the first round of this bill, but again, I just wanted to get the conversation going so that folks had a better understanding of how mismanaged the state's total count of school buildings is at the moment, and how we'll never clear the queue and get to things like decarbonization or whatever other goals people have with the way the queue is currently allowing for this sort of waste. And again, from the state level, we can sit up here and not get bogged down in exactly the kinds of parochial politics you say, and I think the time is about ready for that. We have a budget crisis.
Gets there first, can just start testifying.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Reed. I serve as the Maryland Policy Director for Greater Washington. We're a nonprofit that works to advance sustainability and equity in housing, land use, and transportation. We strongly support House Bill 38, which we believe will help us make the best use of limited school construction funding while supporting housing production. It cannot be said enough times, Maryland has a housing shortage, as many as 150,000 homes, which has resulted in rising home prices, forced families to move far from jobs and loved ones, and caused many people to leave the state entirely. And there are a lot of causes to this, and one of them is adequate public facilities ordinances and housing moratoria. Counties have noble intentions for doing this. It's important that we ensure that school capacity keeps in pace with new development, but APFOs and moratoria do not build schools. What they do is ensure that people have fewer choices in where to live, whether or not they have children. This bill does a couple of things. But I think what's most important about it is that it allows the state to partner with local jurisdictions, determining where our limited school construction funds are best used and ensuring that those jurisdictions also permit the homes that we desperately need right now. Between our budget shortfall, housing shortage, and our ongoing need for school construction funding, we are in need of creative solutions, and we think this is one of them. So we ask for a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lori Graff. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association. Our members create housing for Marylanders all over the state. As Mr. Reed mentioned, we have a housing crisis. I'm not going to go through the numbers. You guys have heard it all plenty of times. But this is one of the solutions. We need some creative things. We need to start talking about things a little bit differently. And this is one of the solutions. There are a lot of reasons that school can be overcrowded. It's not just because of new development. There's the resale market. People are transitioning. Communities transition all the time. You've got programmatic decisions by local board of education, such as magnet programs and other programs that are put in and out of schools. You've got state-rated capacity decisions that change the capacity of schools. You've got out-of-district transfers, redistricting decisions. The list can go on and on. You can talk about demographic shifts and other things. So we feel we really need to take a look at this as one of our solutions. I have some data. I will send it to you. It was not in my testimony. It's a case study we did in Frederick County that looked at some of these things. In 2014, there was 42 more students in the entire school system, yet when they redid the state-rated capacities, some of the schools actually lost capacity, some of them gained capacity. Carroll Manor had 3 more students, but they lost 78 seats. Middletown had 17 less students, but they lost 103 seats. Walkerville High School lost 158 seats, and this is just because of decisions made by the school board and the state-rated capacity just changing. Another example is Blue Heron Elementary. It's near Linganore, which is a growing community in Frederick.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors here in support. As my other panelists said, yes, we do have a housing shortage. And at least one recognition of that is that we have imposed policies on ourselves that have made that shortage is what it is today. And in the case of APFO, it's a self-defeating cycle. We stop development because of infrastructure, but we pay for infrastructure through development and the revenues and the taxes that it provides. And meanwhile, the result of this is we have stifled our own economic growth, and our workforce is overwhelmingly looking to leave Maryland because of our housing shortage, because of our housing costs, because of our housing crisis. So we do thank all of you for starting this conversation, for taking a critical look at the policies that impact our housing affordability and our housing availability for all of our residents here in Maryland. And we ask for your favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I know that Maryland Realtors, you guys provide most of the housing statistics that most people use generally. So is this an issue that's predominantly in the urban, suburban areas? I can't imagine that in rural areas where a county only has 1 or 2 high schools that it even applies. Is that?
By and large, we do hear about this, Delegate, from our more urban counties, although I did hear an experience out of Queen Anne's from one of our members. Probably the builders can explain more of what they have experienced on the ground in those areas. But yeah, I do know that there are some instances on the Eastern Shore where this does apply.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We do have opposition from Mako. Dominic Butchko.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Don Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties here in opposition to House Bill 38. First, I just want to share that we had a pretty positive conversation with the sponsor, and we agree with his intent. That being said, there seems to be some confusion with what the bill is trying to do versus what it will actually do if it's implemented. When we think of how schools are funded and operated in the state of Maryland, counties are only responsible for the funding piece. We sign funding through Blueprint. Once that money is dispersed to the school districts, conversations on policy, curriculum, redistricting, et cetera, that has nothing to do with the county whatsoever. APFOs, adequate public facility ordinances, are broad policies that apply to infrastructure. Sometimes when we have growth, that growth can outpace how we can pay and further that infrastructure, and so they're meant to be a temporary pause. By pausing APFOs for counties, this is not going to address school redistricting capacity. That should be done solely with the school districts currently in the state of Maryland, again, based on they have sole authority over that. Counties have absolutely no authority over that. We are happy to work with the committee and the sponsor. This is an important issue. School capacity does need to be addressed, and with that, we urge an unfavorable report on House Bill 38.
Mr. Chair, just briefly, would it be possible if you could get an idea of what other states do and maybe what is best practices regarding this issue? Because that might be helpful for us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
With this, that concludes the bill hearing. Delegate Kerr, House Bill 298. Do you have a panel delegate? If you do, they can come on.
I do, yes.
Great. Just make sure they identify themselves so I can mark them all.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. I am Delegate Ken Kerr. I'm here today with House Bill 298, demographic data collection on student parents. You know, when I was an undergrad, my degree was in music, and all through college and until I was about age 25, I made my living as a musician. By then I had met my wife and wanted to get married, and she had a child, a 3-year-old. So I had to go back to school to get some type of training that would actually provide a living for me and my new family. So I went back to school to get my teaching certification. Shortly after we were married, my wife got pregnant, changed jobs, and back in 1983, pregnancy was a pre-existing condition, so her employer would not cover the pregnancy. So I'm a full-time student, she's got a new job, and we're really struggling to balance the work-home parenting situation. So I came home from school one day, and my wife's all excited, and she says, "I've got great news. You're going to be a school bus driver." So I became a school bus driver so that I would have health insurance in order to pay for our child. I finished the degree, the child was born, had to still go through my apprentice teaching. So all this time we've got a 3-year-old, a newborn, I'm in school full-time, and it was quite a struggle, but I'm one of the success stories. Completed the degree, everything worked out. Fast forward another 15 years, I became a college English professor and saw students of mine in the same situation that I was in back when I was back in school as an adult. You know, in community colleges, the average student age is about 29, and a lot of them have dependent children. And my colleague, Dr. Ann Hoffman's here with me today, and she can also attest that if we can just keep them in class, we can get them through. But too often it just becomes overwhelming and they disappear, and we can't convince them to come back to class and let us help them through. So college students who are parenting dependent children face unique challenges and that have a profound impact on the rate at which they're successful in completion of their degrees. Preliminary statistics suggest that only about 33% of parents earn a degree upon entering a program. You know, Governor Moore has said that in Maryland, only about 30% of Marylanders have college degrees, yet the new jobs that we're creating in Maryland, 80% of them require some training, a degree or a certification beyond high school. But Maryland doesn't publicly provide any data on specific graduation for college students with dependent children. I assume that's because they don't collect this data. But nationally, the trend shows that only about 18% of student parents earn either an associate or bachelor's degree within 6 years of beginning. So that's the purpose of HB 298, to collect that data. So we have many theories about this demographic and what keeps them from persisting and completing their degrees. But what we need is for institutions to start collecting this data so that we could put together targeted programs to help these people to complete their degrees, because of those 80% of new jobs that require a college degree or some technical training, these are the people we most want to get those degrees and complete that training. Now, perhaps ironically, we had a witness today, a student who is a parent, but she's unable to join us today because her child got sick. Just kind of illustrates the type of pressures that these people have. So I would like you to hear from my panel, and I will turn it over to Dr. Hoffman.
Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony in favor of 0298. My name is Dr. Ann Hoffman. I'm a professor of English and the chair of English and Humanities Department at Frederick Community College. As is the case at most community colleges, many of my students are adult learners who are raising a family and working full-time. For those unfamiliar with the incredible prevalence and cost of caregiving and attending college, I'll share these powerful statistics. It's estimated that 20% of U.S. college students are parenting while trying to earn a college degree, and nearly 70% of two-year college students with dependents are living at or below 200% of poverty. Community colleges and regional four-year public institutions serve more of these students, basically because they are the most affordable and geographically accessible options for people who are tied to the locations of their families. I understand the struggle firsthand. I was a parenting student who graduated with my PhD from the University of Maryland at College Park last spring while raising two children as a single mother. It took me 8 years driving back and forth from Frederick to College Park weekly to earn my degree. I received no targeted support, and I want this to be different for my students. My PhD research on parenting students at community college reveals that parenting students experience financial burdens, scheduling problems, and intense psychosocial stress that increases the rate of dropout and the increased accrual of personal debt. However, programmatic interventions like FCC's Parents Lead that identify and support parenting students in unique ways leads to exponential return on investment with completion rates that exceed those of the general college-going population. In short, parenting students are among the most motivated and the most successful when supported because they are working to improve their children's lives, not just their own. I testify today without hesitation that House Bill 0298 is the first step in helping hundreds of Maryland families earn the credentials to make a livable wage in our state. Without the data that tells us which students and which institutions are serving parenting students, resourcing them is impossible. I'll add that this bill carries no fiscal note, and yet the benefits it will provide for students and families in Maryland is profound. I urge the legislature to consider this bill essential to the implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future and as a necessary component for helping public colleges and universities identify and support the parenting students. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you. Hi, my name is Josiah Klein. I'm an attorney at the National Women's Law Center, where my role centers on advocacy for the needs of pregnant and parenting students to ensure they have the support they need to continue their educations, both at the K-12 level and higher education. The National Women's Law Center co-leads the Coalition for Pregnant and Parenting Students Advocacy, which has more than 24 organizational members and a student council. I want to express my strong support for House Bill 298, which proposes implementing data collection on the parental status of college students in Maryland. Young parents deserve to complete their education free from bias and harassment in supportive environments. But too often, these parents are overlooked, face stigma, and they have to navigate education systems that were not designed to meet their unique needs. These students feel forced to choose between their family's immediate needs and the degrees that can help secure their long-term security economically. At the National Women's Law Center, through our legal helpline and through a student council, we hear directly from student parents about the barriers they're facing. We had one student who was already a parent suffer a miscarriage and miss a math exam scheduled for that day. Despite Title IX's mandate that she be able to make up her test, her school initially denied her request to do so until we intervened. Another student developed mastitis, a painful inflammation of breast tissue, because of insufficient lactation accommodations. Students have described vast challenges they are facing, including housing insecurity, transportation issues, and childcare inaccessibility. These experiences of student parents come from across the nation, but they're not isolated incidents, and if they're happening elsewhere, they are also happening here in Maryland. They illustrate how, despite earning higher GPAs than non-parenting students, they're less likely to graduate. Better data collection is an essential first step to improving college completion rates for student parents. Without comprehensive data on this vital student populations, policymakers and institutional leaders will continue to struggle to identify and dismantle these barriers.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for your testimony and your service, the work you do. Any questions for the bill sponsor or the panel? Okay, thanks for being with us. There are some other folks here. Amy Anderson, Yoselin Amaya, which is virtual. These are all virtual. Do we have virtual ready? Okay, put them on and whoever's up can start. Welcome. Amy, you're up. 2 minutes for witnesses in this committee.
Okay. I'm a 37-year-old single parent to a 6-year-old daughter, currently finishing my last semester in the RN program at Frederick Community College. My journey has been anything but easy. I entered into this program as a newly single parent after my child's father was tragically murdered. I had to navigate unimaginable loss while picking up the pieces for my daughter and myself. The struggles I have faced, financial hardship, limited childcare, and the emotional toll of a single parent household are not unique to me. There are the struggles of countless of other parents in the community who are trying to survive while striving for success. Through tears, exhaustion, and uncertainty, I've pushed forward because I refuse to be another statistic. I refuse to be trapped in a system that sees me as just another number rather than a person striving to give back to my community as a future nurse. But right now, my ability and the ability of many others to continue the fight is under direct threat. As of May 16, 2025, Frederick Community College, Carl and Norma Miller Children's Center, which has provided critical child care support for students like myself, will be permanently closing due to fiscal challenges in higher education. This is not just a disappointment, it's devastating loss for single parents like me who rely on accessible child care to complete our education. The center not only provided care, but also scholarship opportunities that help alleviate the financial burdens. Without it, many of us are left with impossible choices, paused or abandoned our education, struggle to find expensive and scarce childcare, or risk losing everything we have fought so hard for. I personally
Thank you. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
And being with us. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Thanks for all you're accomplishing. Yoselin Hernandez. Thank you. Thanks for all you're accomplishing. Yoselin Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Yoselin Amaya Hernandez, and I am here today in strong support of House Bill 0298. As a student parent, I know firsthand the challenges. I know for. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, Chair Barnes.
We can hear you. If you have your YouTube on, you might want to turn that off because it's going to.
In strong support of House Bill.
Use the direct link.
Okay. My apologies. So as a student parent, I know firsthand the challenges of balancing academics, work, and caregiving. When I was in college, I often had to bring my child to class, study late into the night after putting them to bed, and navigate a system that truly wasn't designed for parents like me. Despite making up a significant portion of the student population, student parents remain largely invisible in higher education policies. Now, as a graduate student at the University of Maryland, I continue to face the same barriers I did 3 years ago. Many of the required courses for my program are only offered during the day, making it nearly impossible to balance my education with work and my caregiving responsibilities. On top of that, to afford my $26,000 annual tuition, I hold both a full-time and a part-time job, yet the financial strain remains overwhelming. With the average cost of childcare in Maryland and close to $20,000 per year for an infant, and with 2/3 of student parents living at or below the poverty line, these costs are simply unsustainable for many. That is why, for the second year in a row, I have worked to lead this bill forward. Student parents deserve to be recognized in the data so that policies and resources can really reflect our reality. Without accurate data on student parents, institutions can't provide the targeted support that we need, whether it's access to childcare, financial aid flexibility, or class scheduling that accommodates working parents. HB 0298 is critical to ensuring that student parents are seen, counted, and supported.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us and testifying today. And congratulations on your success and perseverance and hard work. Any questions? Okay, thank you so much for being with us. Michaela Martin. Welcome.
Thank you. Greetings, Chair Barnes and members of the Appropriation Committee. My name is Michaela Martin, and I crafted and championed the kind of original version of this bill that was passed in Oregon. When I entered community college to start on my 2-year degree, I was a high school dropout, low-income single mother, and I went to my campus for on-site childcare, and they told me there was over a 2-year wait list, which meant that I was not going to receive on-campus childcare while I was working towards my degree. At the time, I couldn't find any data on student parents, how many other there could be on my campus or across the country. What I could find was information about how likely it was as a high school dropout solo parent that my kid would do drugs or drop out of high school or run away. And I was just really deeply impacted by how many other student parents there could be that also weren't receiving these supports. So I now have a Juris Doctorate in Work in Policy and Government Affairs, and this bill has passed in multiple other states because the problem is that when you are invisible, so are your problems. And so we can't meaningfully address the issues faced by parenting students unless we know who they are and what those graduation rates look like. This bill is now being championed by a student parent, Yoslin, and it supports families in supporting themselves and growing. One of the things I'm really deeply excited is Oregon is now collecting this data. It's gone through rulemaking, facilitated question, and I urge you all to support 0298 to count student parents. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for lending your voice to this issue. Any questions? Okay, thanks for being with us. Have a great day. Last witness is Tabitha Pitts. Welcome. Tabitha, you're with us. You can start your testimony of 2 minutes.
Wonderful. Hi, Chair Barnes and members of the Appropriations Committee. My name is Tabitha, and my experience with this bill started a decade ago. I was a student at Oregon State University, and I was a member of a nonprofit organization called the Oregon Student Association. We would go through a process called issue choosing, where we would set our legislative priorities. And just imagine like a really depressing science fair where we all talk about our problems. Michaela was trying to pass a similar version of the bill in Oregon, as you just heard. And like many parents in Maryland today, Michaela was just trying to survive as a parenting student and trying to balance the demands of being both a parent and a scholar. So with a clipboard and branded buttons and a fierce dedication, Michaela worked the room to try to convince a group of primarily non-parenting students like myself to care about her experience. And unfortunately, she was not successful. But I pledged to Michaela that I would stay by her side until we passed the bill. And it took us 6 years to do so. 6 years to pass the bill to start collecting the data we needed to enable policymakers and institutional leaders to make informed policy decisions. How much could we have learned about this population during those 6 years of waiting? How much could we have helped parenting students in that time? As Michaela said, when you are invisible, so are your problems. But students like Michaela enriched my education and my life. What started as a pledge to be a legislative battle buddy has blossomed into a lifelong friendship. And there are Michaelas all over Maryland, parenting students like Yoslin who are insightful, enriching, and caring peers, movers, and shakers. So today you have a simple choice. You can be the kids in the room that don't care, or you can be a legislative battle buddy. You can let parenting students remain invisible, or you can see them, hear them, and help them. and respectfully urge the Appropriations Committee to support House Bill 298 and take this vital step toward creating a more inclusive and supportive educational environment for all.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thanks for your testimony and your work. Any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thanks for being with us. That concludes the bill hearing. I will now move to House Bill 159, Delegate Lewis. And Delegate, if you have any panel, please bring them up. Oh, you do. Michael McMillan, Denise Gilmore, Cherish Vick, David Wright.
Don Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and colleagues. It is my privilege to present my strong support of House Bill 159, the Arbitration Reform for State Employees Act of 2025. This crucial legislation blends a constitutional amendment and statutory changes, aiming to refine how our state government resolves contract disputes with state employees through binding arbitration. The core of this bill is to ensure a fair and expedient resolution process by engaging a neutral third-party arbiter. The current system in place doesn't provide any means for actually settling disputes. Often, negotiations reach a stalemate that can't be resolved by the negotiating parties. In the current process, a neutral fact finder can be appointed to make non-binding recommendations to resolve an impasse. Due to the lack of a forcing mechanism to make those recommendations binding, we often find ourselves in deadlocks that neither party, management, nor employees can break. But even then, management can still impose their desired budget and leave other items of importance unresolved. This situation we encountered under the previous administrations, resulted in state workers being denied the equitable negotiation process that they rightfully deserve. House Bill 159 seeks to address this by introducing a more just and efficient method for settling contract disputes by utilizing a neutral third-party arbiter with binding recommendations. As written, this new system would see both sides agree to an arbiter by July 15th every year, with contract negotiations concluded by September 30th. If an agreement is not reached by October 1st, an impasse is declared, setting off the binding arbitration process. Under the system, both sides present their best and final offer, which the arbiter uses to make final determination by December 15th. This legislation will ensure that we avoid protracted labor disputes and incentivize both sides to come to mutual agreement. The process outlined in the bill ensures that there is a means to resolve negotiation impasses the administration and the state workforce might have. It's not revolutionary either. Binding arbitration is already utilized by a number of Maryland counties and municipalities, and the Maryland Transit Administration is already authorized to use binding interest arbitration in the transportation article. Not to mention the majority of states and the District of Columbia already permit binding arbitration for at least some, if not all, of their state workforce. In previous years, when the bill was introduced, there was discussion about whether this process would impact our constitutional ability to use our budgetary authority as a legislator. To answer that question, we requested guidance from the Office of the Attorney General. In response, the AG's office informed my office that the draft bill does not purport to limit the General Assembly in the constitutional power to increase, diminish, or add items to the budget bill. I'm happy to provide the letter received from the Attorney General for the committee's review if anyone wants it. With the response from the Attorney General, the process laid out in House Bill 159 creates a balanced and final process for contract disputes with the state workforce, while still upholding the legislator's duties as a custodian of the state's budget. This year's bill is slightly different than previous years. What has been introduced over previous years has a few minor changes, particularly with the constitutional amendment that I referenced earlier. We also specify that this bill does not prevent the parties of binding arbitration from being able to pursue a complaint about unfair labor practices. We also are working on a sponsor amendment which will clarify that the bill will go into effect upon approval of the accompanying ballot measure, and the administration has indicated their willingness to work with us to ensure this bill works. Our state employees are the backbone of our government, and they deserve a fair and timely mechanism to resolve labor disputes and contract negotiations. It is imperative that we rectify the shortcomings of our current process to prevent future harm to our employees and, by extension, the quality of services that we deliver to our constituents. In light of these reasons, I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 159. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. My name is Denise Gilmore, and I'm the Legislative and Political Director with AFSCME Council 3 in strong support of HB 159. As you just heard, binding arbitration is already a proven tool for negotiations in 26 states and the District of Columbia. On page 3 of our written testimony, you can see which states already authorize this, but I assure you it's a good mix of blue states, red states, purple states. That's because this policy just makes sense. In Maryland, binding arbitration is in place for employees in several counties, including Frederick, Montgomery, Prince George's, Howard, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Baltimore City, as well as the town of Ocean City. Across the education world in Maryland, public K through 12 and community college educators in all of our counties already benefit from binding arbitration. Despite its widespread use, there has been no widespread crisis where it's been implemented. The proverbial sky has not fallen, and there's no reason to believe it will for state government or public universities if binding arbitration is adopted here. Our goal isn't to secure excessive wage increases that aren't financially feasible. We begin negotiations by requesting financial records to understand what our employers can afford before making our proposals. Our bill simply ensures that the governor must include whatever we negotiate, whether through mutual agreement or an arbitrator's decision, in the state budget. Ultimately, we know that the legislator has the final say on the budget, including negotiated terms, and we trust that you would never approve a budget that is unbalanced. We are urging you to act now because it's time for the state of Maryland and our public universities to modernize its approach to union negotiations. Binding arbitration must be placed on the ballot in the 2026 general election, and if voters approve it, the earliest we would be able to implement it is well after our current contracts expire. So even if you pass this bill, we are still some time away from realizing its benefits. Please provide a favorable report on HB 159. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Cherish Vick, and I'm the Secretary Treasurer of AFSCME Maryland Council 3. On behalf of the 30,000 state and higher education employees Council 3 bargaining teams negotiate for each year, I'm here to speak in strong support of HB 159. I've been a part of the state bargaining team since 2016. In my first year, the administration proposed unreasonable changes, including altering overtime calculations to pay us less for the overtime work we were doing. Given the extent of their concessions, we couldn't reach an agreement and move to fact-finding, which is the non-binding impasse procedure we currently have. While we won at fact-finding, the governor's budget still didn't include the modest raises we had been fighting for, making all the months spent negotiating feel like a waste of time. Over the past 8 years, I felt like I was advocating for our members at the table in a system that's broken, while management has little motivation to compromise. It is a great honor to represent my colleagues at the bargaining table, a responsibility I take very seriously. I come prepared with thoughtful proposals aimed at ensuring we have the resources necessary to provide quality public services to Marylanders and that we are treated fairly as state employees. What am I supposed to do when those across the table don't take these negotiations as seriously as I do? I face managers who simply run out the clock on negotiations, only to engage with serious proposals minutes before the end-of-year deadline. Meanwhile, my colleagues in higher education have to endure long, drawn-out negotiations with no clear deadlines. We won't always agree on proposals, and that's fine, but there should be a fair and impartial way to resolve an impasse when that happens. Without binding arbitration as a deterrent, what keeps the various managers I've worked with honest in the collective bargaining process? And why should my bargaining rights be treated any differently from those of my public sector colleagues elsewhere? Please provide a favorable report on HB 159 so we can fix our broken negotiations in state government. We are simply asking for what other public service workers across Maryland and our country have: a reasonable timeline to conclude negotiations and the ability for a neutral third-party arbitrator to make a binding decision if an impasse occurs. Thank you.
Go ahead. Chair Barnes and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Amalgamated Transfer Union Local 1300 represents over 3,000 employees.
Sorry, what's your name?
Michael McMillan, President Business Agent.
Okay. I don't see you on the list here. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
So Amalgamated Transfer Union Local 1300 represents over 3,000 transfer workers for the Maryland Transit Administration, and we move this state. I'm here to tell you simply that arbitration works. We are proof of it. Right now, we have a process in place that gives fair and equitable opportunities between labor and management. I can tell you this because I've been through this process myself. MTA, it was the Baltimore Transit Company at one point in time, and when it transitioned to state employees as the Maryland Transit Administration, this carried over. Our country had a patchwork of different approaches to collective bargaining, with some transit workers agreeing in the 1950s to binding arbitration with their employers as a less confrontational form of negotiation. Other systems still maintain their right to strike. During the 1960s and 70s, federal aid and regulations transformed the transit system across the country, recognizing that federal government had an interest in making sure that the federal aid did not undermine the existing collective bargaining practices of the transit workforces. Congress passed Section 13C of the Urban Mass Transit Act of 1964. Put simply, this guaranteed that transit workers that had binding arbitration would keep their binding arbitration, and transit workers that had the right to strike would keep their right to strike. But just because you have binding arbitration doesn't mean that you have to use it. Over our last 5 contracts, we've only invoked it twice, and it worked for both sides. One side could win or one side could lose. But what it does do, it created not only a win-lose situation, but it also created better communication and better understanding between labor and management. So we are in support of HB 159.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. We strongly support HB 159. And I'm just going to briefly go over, you've got testimony, but you're going to hear from opponents that binding arbitration is going to be too burdensome, it's going to be spending too much money, it's going to use a bunch of staff time. And I just want to give you some background on that. A couple years ago, you passed a law requiring that USM consolidate all of its campuses contracts into one. We just, in AFSCME, just finished settling that after 2 years. 2 years. It shouldn't have been that long. All of the campuses already had contracts, but USM delayed those negotiations for over a year. And during that year, they also spent huge amount of money that would pay for an arbitrator for decades, but they spent huge amount of money on outside counsel that basically is known to be union avoidance, so that they did not come to the table. We don't have it just in USM, the Morgan State. It has taken 3 years to come to a contract with them. When we are at a negotiating table as a union, we have 3 things. We have nothing, we have binding arbitration, and we have strike. You recognized that state employees, higher ed employees, should have the right to collective bargaining. We're asking you to give them the tool in binding arbitration to make sure that we come forward with the kind of agreements that you foresaw in empowering employees to have the right to collectively organize with their employer. It's clear in binding arbitration we will have clear timelines, we will have the process, it will save money. It is an equal system, and we ask for your support for House Bill 159. Thank you.
I'm here for questions only, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the panel. Ms. Donna, you always know how to start it off, so I really appreciate your testimony. I wanted to be able to give you all the opportunity to kind of address some of the other aspects of the opposition, because it seems a little questionable, some of the things that I saw in the unfavorable testimony. So As to USM and their statement that collective bargaining has been going just fine, and that, dealing with the 25 units has been pretty much without issue, are they just off base on that? What's y'all's take on that?
Allow me, again, David Wright with the law firm of KSC Law. Delegate, let me answer diplomatically and say deadlines motivate. And what this does is it has a deadline and a timeline generally that will get the parties to the table, moving ahead expeditiously, and then you got to get it done. You got to get it done in a way that aligns with your budget process. That's the goal here. That's what this bill reflects, kind of a whole working backwards from the work that you all do to accommodate USM's budgetary needs, DBM's budgetary needs, all the budgetary needs, and to stage that out and get this thing done, because otherwise there are times when things get drug out. I won't assign motives to it right now. The fact of the matter is USM took too long. We don't need to rehash that, but in the future, going forward with USM, certainly it makes sense to always start in a timely way, finish in a timely way, and if the parties are at loggerheads, get them in front of an arbitrator and get a decision for you all to review in a timely way. Timeliness matters. That's how people don't dwell in conflict. You get to the conflict, you get it worked out, and you move on. And as to one of the things that the USM and others mentioned is that as to new bargaining for first contracts and things like that, that this timeline doesn't accommodate that, because sometimes new contracts take a while. The response, Delegate, on that as to a new contract, when you're forming one for the first time, the parties will find the time to do it right, but they still need a timeline and an impasse method. So they can start a little earlier if they need to. They can all agree to roll past it. But if push comes to shove, they need to have a deadline because deadlines motivate. Does that answer your question?
I hear you. I'm not sure if it really answers my question. I just want to know, have things gone smoothly in the past or not?
I'll say no.
No.
Okay. All right. I guess we'll dig into that more later. What about the multi-stage impasse resolution process option or proposal that they've made?
Well, again, what we're talking about, they threw out a whole bunch of options. I don't understand those options that they threw out there. This is as Denise Gilmore indicated, this is the proven method. County to county, city to city, state to state, this is the method. And we've built in, Delegate, opportunities to make it even better than those other, we've learned from those other places and made this top notch. In that there's mediation built into this, and we've also built in referral to the General Assembly and to policymakers. We've started things early. And let me clarify one thing that USM has mentioned and others opponents have mentioned, which is the notion that under this scheme, you get the arbitrator early, select them early, and then the USM has assigned cost to that and said, well, you're gonna have to pay for this arbitrator from July until December, right? And arbitrators are sophisticated, expensive professionals. The purpose of having an arbitrator selected early on is not so that they come to every session, is not so that they micromanage negotiations, but so that they are ready to resolve the dispute at the end when necessary. So some of the opposition talks about tens of thousands of dollars in supervising for months and months and months. That is not, there's no basis for that. It's like if you litigate in court, sometimes you have a judge assigned. That's the judge you always go to if you have an issue, but the judge isn't there with you all the time.
Got it. Yeah, I'm not hung up on that. My last question would just be to USM's argument about unintended consequences, especially fiscally to smaller institutions and tuition fees and reduction in increase in tuitions and fees and reductions in services and positions. What's y'all's take on that?
Okay. On that one, look at the bill. An arbitrator has a very set menu of things that they have to look at. And one of the fourth thing that any arbitrator has to look at in making their decision on whether it's a 5% COLA or a 3% COLA or whatever the case might be, is the financial ability of the employer, USM, whatever institution, to meet costs without the premise that the employer may need to increase or impose new taxes, fees, or charges, or develop other sources of revenue. So the arbitrator looks and says, how big is the pie? The arbitrator doesn't come in and say, well, you need to grow the pie. You need to bake a new pie that's bigger. They say, how big is the pie, and are we going to divide it up fairly or not? This stuff about new fees, tuition increases, the sky is falling stuff, it doesn't fly.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Delegate Grist.
I have several questions. So are you guys bringing this bill forward?
I think we're still working on your microphone.
There you go.
Yeah, give us a second.
Are you guys bringing this bill forward because you think it's fair for all parties? It's a sort of a win-win for both sides of the negotiating table?
Yeah, I think reaching a timely and efficient agreement benefits both sides, absolutely.
Okay. And the reason why I asked that question, because you guys are obviously very supportive of it. I think you said enthusiastically supportive of it. But it looks like the folks who actually have a fiduciary duty to the residents of Maryland and to government, you guys don't. Your duty is to your members of your union. And you guys do a great job with that, by the way. But you don't have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayers. The other side does. In fact, on the other side, many have a direct accountability to the taxpayers of Maryland. And none of those folks are actually supporting this bill. Our higher ed institutions are opposed to it. DBM, they're writing a letter, and it doesn't, obviously, they're not going to support or oppose the bill. They're just writing a letter of information. It says binding arbitration would allow a private arbitrator to have significant influence over the state's fiscal and policy priorities, and this bill provides for no method of appeal or review of the private arbitrator's decision. Many states and local governments with binding arbitration have put significant limitations and guidance into their law as a result. So it seems to me, based on that language, they're also very concerned about this as well. So I guess my question is this really, my first question is this really balanced? I mean, is this something that you guys are bringing because you think it's fair, or is it because there's been a lot of issues that, and I mentioned a couple in particular where you guys didn't get what you wanted in the negotiation, and now what we're hoping for is that a private third party will get you what you want or where you want to get to. Is that the case?
So I would say the negotiations right now aren't balanced. They're not balanced because we can spend months negotiating, and then ultimately management can go forward with putting whatever they want in the budget anyways. They can go forward with either resolving an issue or not resolving an issue. So there's very little deterrent or motivation to actually reach an agreement, or at least that's what it feels like on our side of the table a lot of the times. I think all this bill does, it doesn't necessarily change how we, do labor relations. I think what this bill just does is it forces the conversation around reaching agreement much sooner in the process. And it binds the governor that if, we do reach an agreement, either through mutual agreement or through an arbitrator's decision, that the governor is actually going to move forward and put that then in the budget. Again, it's all premised on the fact that we reach agreement. We certainly have no interest in negotiating anything that's going to throw the state's fiscal situation out of whack. That doesn't benefit us. We know management has no motivation to, negotiate something that's going to throw the fiscal situation out of whack. I mean, the goal is to head to the middle and figure out what we can do so that, folks can continue to make a decent wage working for the state or working in higher education. So, I understand that the current system benefits one side of the table much more than our side of the table, but that's not how collective bargaining is supposed to work. Collective bargaining really should be a level playing field when we're at the table, if it's true collective bargaining.
And I think the other side will probably argue the exact opposite, where, when for collective bargaining, when, we passed a bill last week, which enables collective bargaining if they get the votes. But we also passed a bill 5 years ago that basically says that, the government side can't strong arm. They can't do anything. They can't even have a conversation about collective bargaining, but you guys can. And two, this has been our experience in the past as well. When you guys do have an impasse, you'll still, in good faith, sign the agreement, but then you'll come to the legislature to get those things that you conceded during the negotiations. That's happened time and time again. So I guess my follow-up question to that will be, if this bill does move and a third party makes a decision, whether it's in your favor or not, would you guys still take those concessions to the legislature?
We fully understand the legislator has final authority over the budget.
Well, that doesn't
So
answer the
it's,
question. So you guys will still do that, I'm guessing then, right?
I can't think of a hypothetical situation in the future to predict that, but I would say that we fully understand the legislator has the final authority. If the legislator were to ever deem that whatever agreement we had to settle on was not adequate and decided to increase that, we certainly, I imagine, would not oppose. But again, I mean, that is a decision that would ultimately lie in the legislator's hands, and, you know, we respect that.
And one final question. The current administration's been very, very generous during the time that he's been here. He's filled I think over 2,000 pins, I believe. And he's got in this budget just under 1,000 new pins on top of that. And we've seen raises every year for the last several years as well. So he's, you know, in his budget, he's been extremely generous to our workers. So do you still, even based on that, I mean, do you still feel the need that we need to have this piece of legislation move?
Absolutely. It's about the structure. Regardless of the administration that we have, it's about having a structure that ultimately leads to fair and efficient negotiations. We just don't have that. And quite frankly, and I will say it on record, right, and where arbitration exists, it leads far more towards the parties actually reaching agreement than heading to impasse and going to arbitration. And where they do go to arbitration, more times than not, management wins it first, right? So it's not, you know, we're not fighting for something that we see that is going to, you know, prevail again in these like huge excessive wage increases for us. For us, it's about having a process that's fair and that helps us reach an efficient agreement.
But if it's fair, why isn't DBM here supporting this bill? Why isn't our higher ed institutions here supporting this bill? Why aren't the people who have a fiduciary duty to Marylanders, or why aren't they supporting this bill if it's fair across the board?
I don't mind responding to that.
I will just say from my observations, what I have observed here in Maryland is higher ed has been afraid of its employees having collective bargaining, and especially USM has fought it all the way. And as I kind of inferred, we know that they spent over $1 million on union avoidance firms for a whole year trying not to come through a system that is already broken. But if you really, you know, just in a quick Google, IAFF has had binding arbitration with the city of Baltimore for years and years. And in a 37-year period, they won 2 of the binding arm. The other 14 went either settled or all in management side, all in the legislature, the city council. This is just what I'm trying to, and what Denise has said, the process is broken here. It's broken when you can have an entire arm of, you know, our whole state, the University of Maryland, which I am a graduate and actually was an adjunct professor at one time, but to have them not even want to come to the table and get through a decision, that's what binding ARB does. Nobody wants to spend the money and the time, but it is an outside person looking fairly at the money that here it would be the state, and what it is to, or management, if it's a business, and what is there to spend. And is what the union is asking for fair and legitimate? And can it be done? And if it cannot be done, we are ruled against. And more times than not, we are ruled against. But we don't even have that tool here. We have the tool of wait, worry, and beg. And that's not fair to your employees. So.
I just wanted to add that from a relationship standpoint, I think your question was on who has the fiduciary responsibility. Ultimately, it rests with us as legislators, right? We have the power of the purse. But when, in years past, when they have reached an impasse, I think the thing you're concerned about is what happens, which is the state's workers, the people who represent them, cannot reach an agreement, right, with the governor and their staff. And then now, through our role as policymakers and powers of the purse, we need to make sure that the conditions that our workforce are in are suitable. We have to assert ourselves into that, as opposed to them having a structured enforcing mechanism such that when we get involved, they've already handled it. And whether they won or lost, all of that is already taken into consideration with the arbiter on our fiscal, our bonding capacity. I mean, you name it. That's already handled, right? That's all presented ahead of time, such that there was less of incentive for anyone to come back to us during this process because they would actually reach some form of a decision. Because years past, that was not what was happening. And then we had to assert ourselves to make sure that, like, you did come to some agreement with the state workforce.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. So real quick, so it feels like the current process is time consuming and costly, right? And with hundreds of thousands spent per year on legal fees and taking 2+ years to get to agreement, quick question for you, Ms. Gilmore. Is it possible that this bill will lead to a quicker negotiation and a cheaper one as well?
Absolutely. I mean, we're cutting, negotiations down to 6 months potentially, where, as you've heard in higher ed, for instance, can go on for 2 and 3 years sometimes. I mean, that in and of itself reduces staff time. It reduces the time that our members have to spend on going back and forth to the table and kind of long drawn out negotiations that don't go anywhere. So absolutely.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Delegate Lewis, for bringing the bill. And thank you all for being here. I just had 2 questions for you. One, I guess more of an isn't it so, but I would imagine, we've talked about the expedited process here. And again, getting us to decisions ultimately, for better or for worse, from your perspective, honestly, much quicker. So wouldn't the fact that we are shrinking potentially that timeline mean on both sides, you're spending significantly less money on the negotiations? Whoever you're negotiating with is spending significantly less money on law firms or outside counsel to do the negotiations, correct?
Correct.
And then I think there's another point here that is lost that I just wanted to reemphasize and confirm. This is a constitutional amendment. So regardless of the action that the legislature takes, at the end of the day, what we are essentially doing is we are putting it to the good people of Maryland. We are asking them at a risk, because the public may see things differently, but it is then going to be contingent upon whoever supports this legislation to sell whatever action this General Assembly were to take to the general public before it actually is implemented. Is that correct?
That
Correct.
is correct.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
That concludes the witnesses for this panel. We'll have one more for the Christopher Canal.
Okay. Thank you.
Christopher Cano, Director of Political Legislative Affairs for SEIU Local 500. I know this committee hearing, you just had a long panel, so I'll make it short and sweet. We emphatically support this for all the different talking points that you just heard, but clearly transparency, improving labor relations, and cutting costs and saving tax dollars is the end goal of this legislation. It makes absolute sense to support it, and we ask for a favorable report.
To unfavorable testimony, we have Sherry Rose from the University System of Maryland, Sally Reed Arrow from University of Baltimore, Aretha Lambert Jones from the University of Maryland College Park, and then whoever would like to start, they can please proceed. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony on House Bill 159. My name is Sherry Rojas. I'm the Director of Labor at the USM office. This will be the third major change to collective bargaining in recent years, including the overhaul that completely changed the labor landscape across the USM. As written, this bill seemingly attempts to fix a problem that just does not exist. While some had doubts, the USM was able to successfully negotiate at the table a first-of-its-kind consolidated MOU applicable to 15 units across 9 institutions. Negotiations were complex, but the parties reached agreement on an 80-page contract without the use of a fact finder. The ability to use a fact finder under the existing process undoubtedly pushed both sides to reach agreement. If the fact finder had been needed, the USM would have honored the recommendations, and we believe that the union would have as well. The process worked, and it resulted in a good contract, increasing wages, and improving terms and conditions for workers. If the process can work for consolidated negotiations, it can work for much less complex negotiations, as demonstrated by our institutions over the past 20 years. We have not needed to use a fact finder in our negotiations. There's no need to establish a binding interest arbitration process, which is a process that's generally reserved to public safety units, police, firefighters. Notably, if the terms required to be implemented go unfunded, as written, House Bill 159 would bind the institutions to implement the final award without additional resources. Recently proposed deductions to our budget of 5% amount to $111 million. This is in addition to last year's cut and another mid-year cut to FY25, which leaves the USM down over $180 million cumulatively. The imposition of additional policy changes at this time would be more than challenging for our campuses. Just want to note that we have shared alternatives for consideration, including exclusion of the USM from the bill with the sponsor, and we'd appreciate any opportunity to participate in such discussions. We respectfully oppose House Bill 159. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Sally Reed, and I'm the Chief HR Officer at the University of Baltimore. Thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony on House Bill 159. The University of Baltimore is a small university in Midtown Baltimore, serving primarily upper-level undergraduates and graduate students, including law and business. Our students are mostly first-generation working adults with the average age of 28. Legislation should address a need, and I would ask, what is the problem you're trying to solve? The USM and AFSCME successfully completed negotiations for its first-of-its-kind contract without the need of the fact-finding process currently available. Proponents of this bill focused on the timeline in the process, but I note that the USM presented a comprehensive proposal on day one of bargaining. The bill, as written, could require significant new expenses for the university. In addition to the cost of arbitration itself, the arbitrator's decision may result in significant increases. When the arbitrator considers the employer's ability to pay, there is a significant difference between the USM and other state agencies. 20% of the employees at UBalt are not state-funded employees. They're funded by sponsored research, student fees, and auxiliary operations. The university must find ways to cover these costs. Collective bargaining is not aided by turning the outcome over to a third party. The proposed legislation is further flawed by assigning 3 distinct and conflicting roles to the arbitrator. Including the arbitrator in earlier parts of the negotiations would have a chilling effect on the parties' willingness to be fully open and engaged. I don't speak to this only in my current role. I studied collective bargaining and dispute resolution at Cornell as part of my degree in industrial and labor relations, and I interned with the American Arbitration Association. This is not accepted best practice for arbitration. Rather than solving a problem, this legislation creates one.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Reethi Lambert-Jones, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer at the University of Maryland, College Park. Thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony on this bill. The University of Maryland College Park is the flagship institution of the University System of Maryland with over 40,000 students and nearly 14,000 employees. Ranked number 12 among public universities by U.S. News and World Report and number 54 on Forbes' list of America's best large employers, we're proud of our contributions to education and research and our commitment to our employees. We respectfully oppose House Bill 159 as written, as binding interest arbitration presents significant risks to the university, the system, and the state by placing critical decisions in the hands of a third-party arbitrator. This undermines the ability of these entities to maintain strategic control over institutional priorities. And arbitrators' binding decisions could impose costly financial mandates, potentially diverting funds from essential priorities like expanding educational programs, advancing research, and maintaining high academic standards. Crucially, such decisions would be made without accountability to Maryland or its citizens. As the flagship institution, we play a vital role in shaping statewide education and research, but binding arbitration could hinder the goals outlined in our Fearlessly Forward strategic plan. Additionally, the newly implemented consolidated bargaining process has already led to a successful agreement without third-party arbitration, as you've heard from my colleagues, demonstrating its effectiveness. Introducing binding arbitration now is premature and could disrupt this progress. Finally, binding interest arbitration is rare among Big Ten conference universities, with only 2 institutions subject to it in limited circumstances, mainly applying to nursing bargaining units and police. Adopting such a measure would set an outlier precedent. So for these reasons and those stated by my colleagues, we respectfully urge an unfavorable report to this bill as written. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Everyone okay. Questions? Delegate Grice.
You mentioned other schools in the Big Ten, and you said the 2 that do have binding arbitration have very strict limitations to that. So if this bill were to be amended to do what those other schools do, would you support the bill as amended if that were the case, if there were real strict limitations to binding arbitration?
I do believe that it needs to be, that the bill needs to be amended. I like the favor more the amendments that have been submitted by the system office, which would be to exclude the university system as completely from this process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the language that was brought up by the first panel. So the language of the bill requires the arbitrator to consider the financial ability of the employer to meet costs without the premise that the employer may need to increase or impose taxes, fees, or charges, or develop other sources of revenue. So isn't it true that that language would thwart this idea that it could cause a fiscal issue for smaller institutions or cause tuitions to have to be raised or fees to have to be raised?
As written, no. As someone who is at a budget-constrained smaller institution, one really distinct difference between the USM and the state is our percentage of employees that are not funded by state funds. We have 20% of our employees, and that includes 20% of our bargaining employees. These are not just faculty researchers that are funded by fees. They are funded by student fees. They're funded by sponsored research or auxiliary operations. And we don't print money. So that money would have to come from somewhere. It may make us less attractive to future sponsored research opportunities because it increases our overhead expense and indirect cost rates. It may eat into that overhead, which normally drops to the bottom line to support things like student research opportunities and assistantships. And certainly, you know, student fees fund both activities and employees in our operations.
I'm confused by that answer because it seems that the language says the arbitrator has to consider all those things you just said before they can make an award.
If I might add here, while an arbitrator has a certain set of factors under the bill as written that they would need to consider, there is no guarantee that an arbitrator would ultimately make a decision based on those factors. They consider them, but it doesn't mean if our institutions don't have the funding that an arbitrator is not going to still say that this is my decision and I think you need to move forward with this. What I find oftentimes, first, it's very difficult for an arbitrator to say that the state can't fund something. And it's very difficult for an arbitrator to say that the USM can't fund something. What's more likely to happen is an arbitrator coming back and saying, I've taken all of these things into consideration. You can shift your priorities and make this happen. And I've experienced that firsthand in other jurisdictions.
Okay, yeah, the language says shall, so it seems pretty strong, but I understand. what you're saying.
Shall consider, right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to thank folks from USM and others who come in and meet with me and share their concerns ahead of time. I really appreciate the partnership. I am a graduate of Flagship. I'm on the alumni board, so I appreciate the mission, particularly the outreach we do to communities all across the state. I did want to, I hadn't originally planned to ask a question, but something you said jogged my mind, that you said that arbiters will instruct, I think, institutions to shift their priorities. Can you give examples of why they would say that?
So, like I said, I think it's going to be really difficult for an arbitrator in a decision to say that the state can't fund something or to say that the USM can't fund something. There are monies available. Those monies might be specifically earmarked for a specific purpose, or there might be priorities that the money is intended to be used for. But I don't think that an arbitrator is going to look at that and say, yeah, we understand that you have this money, but you want to use it for something else. The reality at the end of the day is the arbitrator is going to say, you have the money, you can use it for this, you're just choosing it to use it differently. And so the award could very well come out in favor of the union's last best final offer in terms of it being able to be funded while it might not be in line with the priorities of the institution.
The reason why I asked the question, and I appreciate the response, is because if something's earmarked, it has to go to that thing by law. We are well-versed in earmarks up here in the Appropriations Committee. We have special funds for all sorts of things. We tag things in ways that we want. But the reason why I thought about it is like, an area where I can imagine a arbiter would instruct any institution, not specifically USM, to make sure they find the resources is, let's say the working conditions are dangerous, right? That isn't something that like you need to wait for people to just figure out. You just need to do that. That's not necessarily tied to wages or fringe benefits per se, but to safety, things of that nature. Again, that may not be top of mind for USM, but why it would be important as a priority. But based off the language here, they're limited in their ability to instruct you all at all. I know we're going to continue to have conversations. I appreciate you all coming. I know it's not easy to come up here year after year, knowing that particularly many of us, you don't have close relations with the state workforce, and it's a hard position to be, so I appreciate that. And we'll see where it goes, you know, but I know we're going to continue to talk. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that concludes the bill hearing. Thanks
Appreciate
for being
it,
with
thank
us.
you.
Delegate Harris, House Bill 473. Delegate, are any of these people on your panel, or you can bring up folks, just make sure that they give us their names so I can mark them off. Derek Cooley, Chris Cano, Brad Phillips, Kenzie Funk. You all can come up. That's five.
Well, great afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and amazing colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 473 before you today. For the record, I'm Delegate Kevin M. Harris. I represent Legislative District 27A, which covers Charles and Prince George's County. Last year, I sponsored House Bill 607, which expanded eligibility for students using the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship. After careful review, the Maryland Higher Education Commission identified ways to improve the program for students. So I'm back this year to propose a few technical amendments to expand college access and affordability for the Promise Scholarship Program. The technical changes will give part-time students enrolled in an associate's degree program the chance to receive the scholarship for up to 6 years. This is an important adjustment as many part-time students balance their education with work or family responsibilities, which can extend the time needed to complete their degree. By offering additional support, this change ensures students have the resources and time they need to finish their education without added pressure or financial burdens. Similarly, the bill guarantees that students working towards professional licensures, certificates, or participating in registered apprenticeship programs can receive the award for up to 3 years. This extended financial support is crucial for completing demanding programs that may take several years, enabling students to gain the skills and credentials necessary for a long-term success in their career. Together, these provisions offer critical support to a diverse range of students, ensuring they have the time and resources needed to succeed. For these reasons, I ask for a favorable report from my colleagues on House Bill 473.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of House Bill 473. I am Sanjay Rai, Secretary for Maryland Higher Education Commission. I want to immensely thank Delegate Kevin Harris for sponsoring this bill, which proposes a few technical amendments to expand college access and affordability for the Promise Scholarship Program. As you know, community colleges are a very integral part of our post-secondary education ecosystem. We are home to 16 outstanding community colleges, providing accessible and affordable post-secondary opportunities across our state. Together, all these 16 community colleges serve nearly 230,000 students through credit and non-credit programs, equipping them with the skills needed to succeed in today's workforce. Currently, about 102,000 students are enrolled in credit programs, with majority of these students are part-time students due to family obligation and their jobs as well. On an average, these students take 5 to 6 years to complete an associate degree. This bill ensures that part-time students can access the Promise Scholarship for the duration of their studies, allowing them to complete their education without financial hardships. Additionally, about 129,000 students are enrolled in non-credit programs, many of whom pursue certifications and licensures. If passed, this bill would extend scholarship eligibility to these students as well, broadening access to career training in high-demand fields. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brad Phillips. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and I'm here in full support in this legislation, House Bill 473. I want to thank the delegate as well for introducing this legislation. I'll be respectful of your time. This is a technical cleanup bill. It will help students who are part-time, particularly, to continue on their education. You've already heard extensively from students who have families that are trying to go to college. The majority of our students are part-time. Imagine going 3 years and then your funding run out. Without this change, that would happen. So we encourage a favorable report, and I'm here to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Christopher Cano, SEIU Local 500. Our workers represent over 23,000 folks in Maryland, many of them who are professors at our community colleges, and they know firsthand the value of a community college education. When you think about students and what it takes to raise a family in this day and age and different commitments to work full time, this bill just makes sense. It's pretty cut and dry, pretty simple, and no reason to belabor the point. We emphatically support it, and we ask that you do too.
Good afternoon, Chair Barnes and committee members. My name is Al Dorset, the Executive Director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance. Really, they've said it all. This bill aligns with the major enhancements we made to the program, and we ask for your report.
Seems like a pretty straightforward bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day. That concludes the bill hearing. Move on to House Bill 552, Delegate Tavares. And I think there's one.
We always compete.
We have two virtual witnesses, so if we want to queue them up, as soon as Delegate Tavares is done, we can put them on.
Thank you, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and committee members. I ask for your favorable report on HB 552, preventative measures for fentanyl consumption on college campuses as amended. This bill is part of a package of bills to address fentanyl misuse amongst youth. This important bill proposes a preventive strategy to a rising demand of fentanyl in college campuses. Accidental fentanyl exposure has been an increasing issue across the country, with Maryland being amongst the top states for demand, with fentanyl being 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and 5 times stronger than heroin. Even minimal, unintentional exposure, such as a grain of salt, can lead to fatal consequences. In 2021 alone, fentanyl was involved in nearly 77% of young adults' overdose deaths, many resulting from unknowingly consuming powder, pills, drinks, or other substances contaminated with this potent drug. Surveys indicate that around 25% of college students report encountering substances unknowingly laced with fentanyl. We have collaborated with stakeholders to refine this bill, ensuring that all concerns are addressed. The amended bill, as it stands before you, grants institutions the flexibility to place drug detection products in locations of their choice. Regarding cost, the Maryland Department of Health has confirmed that these products will be provided at no charge through the ORP program, the Opioid Response Program. Another department links the availability fund from the Opioid Restitution Fund to disruption efforts, therefore limiting cost. As for reporting, institutions are already submitting reports, and their reporting process will remain unchanged. However, they will now be required to include the number of drugs detection products they make available. In closing, we need to provide our students with the resources they need to stay safe and healthy. By approving this measure, we will take an essential step in safeguarding our youth from unintentional drug exposure and promoting a safe learning environment. I ask this esteemed committee for your favorable report on HB 552. I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Questions? Okay, we do have a virtual witness. Pull them up. Hey, John, welcome. You're on. 2 minutes. John, you can start.
Oh, okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak in front of the committee. My name is Dr. John Kotz. My degree is in higher education leadership. I also have a decade working in SUD treatments, and I'm the father of 1 current college-age student and 3 soon-to-be college students. So I'm coming in to you in kind of a 3-prong role with in favor of Bill 0552. So studies have shown, including my own doctorate research, that fentanyl is increasing its presence on college campuses. A simple search on Google Scholar or a similar research-based website can take you to numerous studies of that linked. I think the scary part with fentanyl is that it's not just being taken by itself or with opioids, but it is being mixed with other substances. And that to me is the big alarm here. So for me, Bill 0552 is an added preventative measure. It'll decrease the risk of accidental ingestion or overdose before it happens. It can also utilize resources such as Narcan and EMS in other areas because it is, essentially helping detect anything before consumption. So with that, because of my studies, my role in SUD treatment, and my responsibility as a father, I'm highly in favor of Bill 0552. So thank you guys for taking a minute to listen, and I'm open for any questions.
Thanks. We'll move on to House Bill 538. Jennifer Crawley is in favor of the bill. Come on up as well. Delegate Shetty.
I'm going for a record here, colleagues, so we're going to be the quickest and easiest bill hearing of the day. Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, members of the House Appropriations Committee. For the record, my name is Emily Shetty, and thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 538. What this bill does is it transfers the administration of an existing federally funded program called the Commodity Supplemental Food Program from the Department of Aging to the Department of Human Services to better align the administration of hunger and nutrition programs. The Department of Human Services runs already, like most of our nutrition and feeding programs. So what this bill will do is it ensures that this existing program that provides groceries to go for low-income beneficiaries that are over the age of 60 would just move over into the DHS program administration. Nothing else changes. Both departments are aligned and in support of the effort, and I really appreciate the committee's consideration of HB 538 and respectfully request a favorable report. So we have here, just in case members have technical questions about the existing program, Deputy Secretary Jennifer Crawley from the Department of Aging. She can speak briefly to the program or take questions directly from members. Thank you.
Or bill sponsor. Deputy Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thanks.
That concludes the bill hearing. Move on to House Bill 684, Delegate Heineball.
Sorry about that. I wasn't asleep. I was paying attention. So, anyway, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, fellow members of the Appropriations Committee, thank you for the opportunity to present House Bill 684 for your consideration today. For the record, I am Delegate Jim Heineball. I represent District 1A, which is Garrett and Allegheny County. Also to note, this bill was cross-filed by Senator McKay as Senate Bill 420. The bill basically proposes an extension of a program that has a relatively long history. It started in 2017 when there was a bill that required the Department of Natural Resources to develop a plan and a budget for the protection and care, basically water quality, of the 16 state-owned lakes. That bill then, in 2018, the next session, there was a bill passed that created the State Lakes Protection and Restoration Fund, and it set aside, it designated funding for 3 years at $1 million a year, and that was in FY 19, 20, and 21. That bill was subsequently extended for another 3 years at $1 million a year, and that legislation sunsets on 30 June of this year. The purpose of the legislation was to provide dedicated funding to care for the state lakes, specifically water quality. DNR manages the fund. They identify the projects and oversee the execution of the projects. This bill would extend the fund for 2 years. Now, the original bill was drafted, it said 1 year, and it was $1 million in FY 27. Senator McKay and I have requested an amendment to the bill. Given the budget situation and trying to be realistic about where we are and what we can do, we're amending the bill to say $500,000 in '26 and $500,000 in '27. That's, again, we're just trying to be realistic about what we can do. We have two objectives with this. The first is simply to keep the fund alive, to keep it from expiring. The second is more direct, and I'll talk about it in a little detail, and that's to address the urgent problems we have with water quality currently in Deep Creek Lake. Again, because of the limited resources and the limited amount of money that we're requesting, this is a little different than previous bills because this money will be dedicated to Deep Creek Lake. And I'd like to explain real quickly our thinking and justification for that if I could. First of all, Deep Creek is the largest state lake by far. It has about, depending on water, it has about 74 miles of shoreline. Secondly, it has the greatest economic impact of the state-owned lakes. Third, historically, about 50% of the money that was in the fund, or about $500,000 a year, went to projects in Deep Creek Lake. Fourth, the lake is aging, it's getting old. It's, in fact, the 100th anniversary is this summer, and there's starting to be problems that are associated with aging, water quality problems. And fifth, the state benefits significantly from Deep Creek Lake economically. For example, we have vacation rentals are a big business around Deep Creek Lake. The state sales tax on those rentals in 1 year is $4.5 million. Also, in terms of property tax within the Deep Creek Lake watershed, the state gets about $4.5 million a year in property tax as its share of the property, and that number is growing with the development and growth. In addition to that, the state gets millions of dollars from like dock fees, taxes on boat sales, boat rentals, food and beverage service, and all that sort of thing. Lastly, number 6, Deep Creek is a state-owned lake. The point being here is it's in the state's interest to help maintain the water quality in Deep Creek. It's to their financial benefit. No doubt to Garrett County also. I don't want to, I was cautioned not to make this as lengthy as some of the other presentations, so jokingly. I'm going to end my presentation with that and by asking you for your favorable consideration of this bill. And as I said, that concludes my presentation, subject to any questions you might have.
Delegate Acevedo, you got a question?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Appreciate you bringing the bill. Seatmate, big fan of Deep Creek. So just so I understand you correctly, what this bill in terms of the allocation is a fraction of what Deep Creek essentially brings to the state. Am I understanding that correct? Like in terms of property taxes, sales taxes?
I don't have a total number. I just know it's big, and the 500,000 would essentially be insignificant in terms of the benefit. Now, somebody may be thinking the county benefits economically, and we do. But there are other ways that the county invest in the lake and the water quality and all the things that go with tourism and hospitality industry in Garrett County.
Right.
Fire and safety, law enforcement, road maintenance, water, all those kind of things.
Appreciate it. So it's a fraction.
Chair, I noticed there was something on the news yesterday, and I was kind of half doing 5,000 things at once, so I didn't pay particular attention. But does Deep Creek Lake provide water for the homes around Deep Creek Lake, or are they dry, or they're wells? And if you can't answer it.
No, it's a Deep Creek Lake. Most people don't realize Deep Creek was built in the 1920s. It's a hydroelectric facility. It produces electricity. There's I think it's a 20 megawatt plant there that goes into the PJM grid. The water systems around the lake, public water and sewer around the lake, the public water comes from wells. There's no surface water used in Garrett County, I don't think, for potable water. And the water is also used from the lake, provides water for snowmaking for the WISP. And if you've been up there, there's a white water course on top of the mountain. Water is pumped from the lake to the top of the hill to operate the white water course.
Which basically for kayaks and things like that?
Yes.
So that probably attracts a lot of business too. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just as a follow-up to that question, would you be willing to give us a dam tour?
As a matter of fact, if we can work it out, I can arrange a pontoon boat tour of the lake, and we'll show you all. They'll show you the problems with water quality, like subaquatic vegetation, hydrilla, erosion control, all those kinds. We'd be happy to do that.
One thing a session, so. Second. All right, well, thank you for the sunset bill. Obviously, you've done a good job in just a 2-year sunset, cutting the fiscal note in half, so you've done your due diligence, and we'll look at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next bill is House Bill 597, Delegate Dana Jones. And let's see, you have Liz Sunderman, Chad Helton, and Mary Hassler.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Delegate Dana Jones, representing District 30A, Annapolis and Anne Arundel County. Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and fellow members of the Appropriations Committee, I come before you today to reintroduce House Bill 597 that seeks to minimally increase funding for our State Library Resource Center. SLRC is the state library for Maryland, working with our libraries across the state. SLRC provides cooperative, cost-effective resources and services for Maryland libraries and all of our constituents. Maryland's local libraries systems, serve a critical role in all of our communities. They provide a wide range of services to our constituents outside of being a place to read, learn, and congregate. SLRC supports our local libraries and bolsters the services that can be offered. The State Library Resource Center provides services such as including broadband internet, digital resources, as well as access to millions of items that can easily be obtained by citizens in their home counties. SLRC conducts training for local library staff and organizes programming for the public, such as homework help and language learning services, all at no cost. It is a highly collaborative system that maximizes return on state and local dollars and allows county library systems to operate most efficiently. SLRC serves Maryland's public, academic, school, and special libraries. Like everyone, the SLRC has also been hit by the impacts of inflation during recent years. The contracts for the vendors that SLRC uses to provide many of these services have outpaced their current funding. My panel can describe it in further detail, the effects this has had on them, and the ability to provide our state with the resources that they have become accustomed to. The SLRC is also an extremely well-utilized economical, and cost-effective way to connect all Marylanders with a multitude of variable services, including workforce and small business training, database access, and interlibrary loan services. Our library system is more important today than it ever has been, and the SLRC is integral to our local library operation. I would note that FY24 SLRC circulated over 355,000 items throughout the state. The Sailor Database Consortium, available to all public libraries and public schools, was accessed 8.9 million times statewide by all of our constituents. Approximately 1,000 people visited SLRC's physical location at the Enoch Pratt Free Library. So with that, I humbly ask for a favorable report on HB 597 and turn it over to the panel. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and honorable members of the committee. I'm Mary Hassler. I'm the CEO or Director of Harford County Public Library, and it is joy to be here to talk about something that is so critical to the success of our students and our communities. The State Library Resource Center is truly a crown jewel of Maryland's library system, delivering an incredible return on investment for communities across the state. It provides essential resources and services that strengthen local libraries, ensuring equitable access to information and content for all Marylanders. At Harford County Public Library, we rely on SLRC, the Sailor Broadband Internet Service, and the Sailor Database Consortium collection, which extends critical digital resources to even the most remote areas of our county and the corners of our state. Additionally, SLRC houses Digital Maryland, providing 24/7 global access to invaluable local history collections. Through this, Harford County Public Library provides Harford's Living Treasures oral history collection accessible worldwide, anywhere. And that ensures our community's voices and your community voices are heard and preserved for future generations. Simply put, the State Library Resource Center is an indispensable resource that empowers libraries to better serve their communities. I respectfully urge your support for House Bill 597 to ensure its continued success and impact. And I also welcome you to visit any of your wonderful libraries in your communities to see firsthand the impact of the State Library Resource Center. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Chad Hilton. I am the new President and CEO of the Enoch Pratt Free Library. I'm here to express my support for the State Library Resource Center, and thank you all for your time and consideration, and I yield my time.
Thank you, Chairman Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and committee members for hearing us today. Thank you, Delegate Dana Jones, for your kind words in sponsoring this bill. I am Liz Sunderman-Zinger, and I'm the Chief of the State Library Resource Center. I'm here today to urge you to support our funding increase. We're a crucial component of the education ecosystem in Maryland. In these difficult financial times, a very small investment in us will have compounding impact across the state. One example is our databases that Mary alluded to and other electronic resources. These include official legal resources and forms that Marylanders can use to save time and money, test and career prep practice tests and guides for the GED, SAT, LSAT, TOEFL, U.S. citizenship test, and more, as well as vetted, impartial, and accurate research sources and extensively used in K-12 schools. In fact, K-12 school users searched our databases nearly 2 million times in FY24, with almost 9 million searches overall. If these databases were paid for by the individual school systems and public libraries, they would cost the state $4.6 million. But for us, because we negotiate multi-year library statewide consortium rates, it costs us only $600,000, which is incidentally about the amount of increase we're asking for. That's $4 million worth of education saved for y'all. Without us, either Marylanders would either lose access to those resources because local communities cannot afford them, or people would have to source a whole lot of money from other resources than us. We know times are hard. We aren't asking for any increase in FY26, even though we need it. But going forward, we're going to need 4% per year just to keep up with costs. You know we're passionate. We come every year. You know we get results. Please vote favorably on the bill so we can do our jobs unless I'm perpetually seeking the money we need to do them. Thank you so much for hearing us today.
Thank you, and thanks to the witnesses and the job you do, service you provide. Any question for the bill sponsor or the panel? Okay, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so
It's a bill hearing.
Thank you.
I think next up is Delegate Wallach, House Bill 520. There are 3 people in favor, Monica Schaefer, Karen Lee, and Kristen Reagan. If the bill sponsor's okay, you all can come on up.
I can start. Good afternoon, Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and esteemed members of the Appropriations Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Sarah Wallach, here to present HB 520, Maryland Workforce Retention, Recruitment, and Reentry Act. HB 520 attempts to take a first step to address our state's labor force participation issues, along with vacancies in our state government. The bill asks that when a job becomes vacant in the executive side of our state government, the agency should evaluate whether or not that job could be done as a job share, meaning could two people take that job instead of one. And if that is the case, when they advertise the position, they should advertise it both as a full-time position and as a job share, opening the door for potentially hiring two people or one person. It does not mandate that they hire a job share. It simply makes that a possibility. The good news is that the state agencies are already doing this, right? They are already hiring people on a part-time basis, but right now only about 1.7% of the state's executive agency workforce in 2023 was part-time. Currently, the process of designating roles to be part-time is very ad hoc. It sort of just happens, or it frankly doesn't happen. And what this bill does is bring some intentionality into that designation. The bill is designed to make the review process very lightweight. We are not asking for every single position in the state executive to be evaluated right away. We're simply saying, the bill simply says, as the position becomes vacant, please review it and then post it. And so over the course of some years, we imagine that a lot of these positions would be evaluated. It won't be all in one go. And so it will alleviate some of the fiscal burdens on our state agencies to do this review. Studies have shown that net productivity increases when two people share the job, making it for a more effective workplace, also for the employer. And job sharing is just another tool in the toolkit as we try to recruit, retain Marylanders and encourage some, frankly, to get back into the workforce. I do want to bring your attention to the sponsor amendment. DBM has indicated, in fact, that they are doing this, and the tri-pin system, which the bill had indicated earlier, is not really necessary. And so the sponsor amendment scrubs the language around tri-pin and simply says, you know, review it and make those jobs, advertise them, and recruit as appropriate. The second portion of the sponsor amendment also details that the union's bargaining rights stay intact, and this bill does not infringe upon those. As the committee knows full well, while the U.S. nationally got back to pre-pandemic employment in the summer of 2022, as recent as this past fall, Maryland still had not. According to the Comptroller's State of the Economy report, there has been a decline in labor force participation that predates the pandemic. In 2021, approximately 9% of men between the ages of 35 and 44 were simply out of the labor force, meaning they're unemployed and they're not even looking for a job. For women aged 25 to 34, that number is close to 18%. And the decline has been more pronounced in Maryland for women than other parts of the country. So the question is, why is this happening? Why is our labor force participation decreased? Well, there are three main reasons, and my panelists will speak to them in more detail, but I will just detail that. First, it is we have an aging population, and they're looking for different kinds of opportunities in their workspace. Caregiving responsibilities are also, infringing on people's ability to work full time. And frankly, just earlier in the day today, we heard about chronic health issues. A third of millennials are experiencing chronic health issues. So if you have that, you might not be able to work full time, but you can very well work part time. So of course, not having people engaged is devastating. This is a structural issue. A vast portion of our working population is simply unable to participate when we structure work as full-time. And due to these reasons, we are also losing out on tax revenue. Our state relies 50% of our tax revenue actually is derived from personal income taxes. So on a macro level, not having these Marylanders in the workforce, we are foregoing revenue and also infringing upon our economic growth. On a micro level, our Marylanders are losing out on the opportunity to contribute and also save towards their retirement. There's so many negative impacts simply not being part of the workforce. According to the most recent fiscal briefing we received, there are 5,295 vacant positions in the state executive agencies. Moreover, turnout is higher than expected, so we're having trouble retaining our talented workforce. And by opening up these part-time positions, it gives us one, like I said, another tool in the toolbox. So in closing, I'll just say that all of us here care deeply about the work we do as delegates. It provides meaning and purpose in our life. And so not only are there economic benefits to working, work also helps build a sense of well-being and purpose and lifts up human flourishing. So with that, I'm going to ask for your consideration and for a favorable report on HB 520 and turn it over to my panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Barnes, Vice Chair Chang, and esteemed members of the House Appropriations Committee. I'm Monica Schaefer, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to testify in support of HB 520. Today, I am speaking on behalf of the Montgomery County Commission on Aging and Age-Friendly Montgomery County, a certified WHO AARP community for a lifetime. And as a research health psychologist and gerontologist, I'm keenly interested in how individuals and organizations can thrive in the 21st century longevity economy. Passage of HB 520 could help to address labor shortages by recruiting and retaining a talented, often overlooked and underutilized labor pipeline of older adults, including current state employees who are interested in phased retirement and or find it difficult or impossible to work full-time. HB 520 will help to implement new employment pathways for workers who both need to and want to work for financial stability as well as for continued engagement and purpose, and propel state government to lead by example in making Maryland longevity ready. 10,000 Americans are turning 65 every day, and many are ready to delay retirement for more than 5 years in exchange for flexibility. And we know that there are not enough younger workers to fill all the vacancies that are predicted into the next decade. Job sharing ensures not only a smooth transfer of critical knowledge, but creates opportunities for cross-generational mentoring, promoting the co-generation of strategies for innovating how we work in the 21st century. We urge favorable consideration of HB 520. This legislation allows the state government to test a program that would reduce age bias, foster economic growth for the state, and equally as important, economic opportunity and enhanced well-being for individual workers. Thank you.
Chair Barnes, who's gone, and committee members, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Karen Lee. I'm the CEO of SEEK. It's a nonprofit organization that supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to live, work, and thrive in Montgomery County, DC, and Prince George's County. People with disabilities, intellectual and developmental disabilities, experience poverty and unemployment at a rate of 4 times that of people who do not have disabilities. This bill, while it is not a guaranteed job, begins to start to level the playing field in opportunities for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to be a part of the workforce in the state of Maryland. SEEK has supported over 1,000 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to get and keep jobs in the 35 years I've been in leadership at SEEK. 86% of those people start their work as part-time. Today, we support over 200 people in jobs, and the majority of them started with part-time work and have turned to full-time work as they have on-ramped into their positions. Some of them work at the local level in the county government, some work at the federal level, but very few work at the state level. The flexibilities available at the county level and at the federal level do not exist at the state level. The impact of work that we do to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in work is that currently of those 200 people that we support in employment, that they earn bring in over $4.2 million of combined income. That is an increased tax base, that is an increase of consumerism, and it is, of course, an increase of people being able to live in neighborhoods just like you and I live in. So we support House Bill 520 and an opportunity to level the playing field for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities entering the workforce for the state of Maryland.
Hello, Vice Chair. Kristen, oh, sorry. Hello, Vice Chair Chang and honorable committee members. I am Kristen Reagan, a former civil servant, a mother of two, and a fierce champion of HB 520, which has the power to be a catalyst for important and necessary change. Growing up, I worked hard to find a meaningful career where I could make a difference. I graduated from Williams College and then spent 12 years working for the NSA, including the time before and after September 11th. I loved that career and felt great about the contributions I was making to our country during a critical time in the war against terrorism. When I started a family, I came to the difficult crossroads that many women face. How do you juggle the demands and rigidity of a full-time job, the 24-hour demands of being a mom, and the unequitable division of household labor? Additionally, both of my kids had developmental delays. In order to be the caregiver that I wanted to be and the parent that my children needed me to be, it required flexibility, so I made the difficult choice to leave my job. All of the valuable knowledge, skills, and experience I had went out the door with me, along with tens of thousands of dollars the government had invested in my background check and 13 months of language training. I have had several part-time jobs since, but I have been unable to find a job that balances the necessary flexibility with the ability to engage in meaningful, substantive work and access to benefits. That landscape of opportunities is sparse. The part-time opportunities I have found are not aligned with my skills or my policy expertise. Furthermore, I have not been accruing anything towards my retirement, am dependent upon my husband for health care, and I have been unable to build the type of professional network that comes with working for an organization. I have friends who feel forced to stay in unhealthy marriages simply because they also took a career pause, and they now are disadvantaged both professionally and financially. This may be my story, but it is common to many women. HB 520 gives us the opportunity to change that, and I and many people I know would be excited to explore the resulting job share opportunities. Retention would not have been an issue for my career had job sharing been an option, and I look forward to the potential for reentry this bill will inspire. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much to the bill sponsor and also to the witnesses for providing testimony. Are there members, committee members who like to pose any questions?
Just a real quick question. At the bottom of DBM's letter, it says that, I guess, to transition to what the bill envisions would require significant changes to their HRIS system. Will that be addressed?
Right, so in the sponsor amendment, the bill has already been updated. I've scrubbed the reference to the tri-pin system, which is what they're referring to, with the HRIS system, because they already have something in place, and there's no need for us to recreate. So that's been addressed. Thank you for asking.
Are there any other questions from members of the committee? That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 520. The committee will now move on to House Bill 86, Delegate Vogel, Institutions of Higher Education, Elementary and Secondary Schools, Titles 6 Coordinators. And Delegate Vogel, if you'd like to bring up your panel, includes Meredith Weasel, Inav Shak, Nava Goldstein, Luda Ascavara, and those individuals could all come up. And then also this bill is jointly assigned with Ways and Means. And this afternoon from the Ways and Means Committee, we have joining us Delegate Fair and also Delegate Patterson and Delegate Hornberger. So thank you very much to them for joining us. Delegate Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Appropriations Committee, and my colleagues on the Ways and Means Committee. I come before you with House Bill 86, which requires that every institution of higher education in the state and local school system designate a Title VI coordinator. I'm sure you all are familiar with Title IX coordinators. Title VI coordinators would be responsible for making sure that every local school system and institution of higher education is complying with the provisions of Title VI, which prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. So the bill is pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. I will just note that we do have one amendment here that is important and is responding to one of the unfavorable testimonies that you might see, which is striking the governing body of each and replacing it with just each institution of higher education, recognizing that the governing boards don't need a Title VI coordinator, but rather the individual institutions of higher education do. With that, I urge a favorable report, and we'll turn it over to the rest of this panel.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Meredith Weisel, I'm the Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League. ADL is a leading anti-hate organization, and we are here in strong support of House Bill 86. We have seen a tremendous rise in anti-Semitism and other forms of hate the past few years, particularly on our college and university campuses and our K-12 spaces. During the last academic year, from 2023 to 2024, across the country, we recorded over 1,400 anti-Semitic specific incidents on our campuses. And in 2023, in Maryland specifically, in the K-12 space, there was over 129 incidents, which was a 461% increase from 2022. And Maryland ranked, unfortunately, 4th in the country for anti-Semitic incidents in our K-12 spaces. Just recently, also, ADL with Hillel International and College Pulse fielded a survey of more than 135 universities across the United States. The report just came out on Thursday, January 30th, and it showed that 83% of Jewish college students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism firsthand since the October 7th attack. What we are seeing is that Title VI is not necessarily something that a lot of students understand or understand where they should go to. And Title VI, as the delegate noted, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, denied benefits of, or be subject to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal funds. So it's really important just to understand that our colleges and universities, our K-12 spaces, students are looking for where should they go. They don't know where they're supposed to go. And just like Title IX, Title VI is vital, and having a Title VI coordinator would ensure that any student that is facing something that could be perceived as a Title VI violation understands where to go. And so students themselves need to understand how to effectively advocate for themselves. I'm going to stop here because we have a couple of students from UMD and a colleague of mine who's a recent graduate as well from college, and I think it's more important to understand and hear from them what is happening and why this bill is vital. So we would ask for House Bill 86 to receive a favorable report. Thank you. You're up.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Chang and members of the committee. My name is Luda Saharov, and I serve as the Assistant Regional Director at the ADL Washington, D.C. office. I'm also a recent graduate of the University of Oregon, where I served as Student Body President, and I'm here today to voice my strong support for House Bill 86. As a Jewish student, I experienced firsthand the devastating effects of anti-Semitism on campus, from vile slurs to personal threats and doxing attempts.
I, along with other Jewish students, faced a hostile environment and constant harassment. After the events of October 7th, even as the student body president who was very connected to the administration, I found myself at a loss of where to turn to report incidents of anti-Semitism to receive a meaningful response. The reporting process was unclear. I was bounced between multiple offices, all of which struggled to coordinate with each other. This lack of clarity and coordination is something I've heard echoed by hundreds of students across the country, including many in the University of Maryland system. My experience navigating this broken system is what led me to work at ADL, where I've spent the past 6 months researching this legislation and advocating for its passage. ADL has long advocated for Title VI coordinators to ensure compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. These coordinators should be trained to assess and adjudicate reports of discrimination, provide clear and accessible reporting mechanisms, and ensure timely investigations and transparency. These roles would help alleviate the confusion students like me felt who in moments of need. This legislation, as Meredith said, it's not limited to protecting one group. It's about addressing the growing tide of bias and discrimination that affects all students. So for me, this is deeply personal. No student should have to wonder if their school will take action when they face hate and intimidation. And as a graduate of a Big Ten school, go Ducks, I would love to see Maryland take the lead in creating a model for other states to follow. The University of Maryland system has a history of excellence and has an opportunity to set a standard that others can emulate in ensuring equity, safety, and accountability for all students. So I urge you all to vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'd like to begin by thanking Chairman Barnes and the committee for the opportunity to be here on this important day. I'm deeply grateful to Delegate Vogel for introducing this bill and for being an outspoken voice against anti-Semitism on campus and everywhere. My name is Einav Tzach, and I'm a proud Terp of the University of Maryland College Park. I'm honored to be testifying today in support of House Bill 86. I come here today as an Israeli immigrant to the United States, a grandson of Holocaust survivors, representing my nearly 6,000-strong Jewish and Israeli campus community, a community that continues to grapple with the explosion of campus anti-Semitism on October 7th. Here are some examples. Last school year, someone chalked the phrase Holocaust 2.0 on the ground of a main plaza on campus on the anniversary of the Kristallnacht pogrom. Last week, the words "Smash Zionism" were chalked on that same plaza. It was International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Posters advertising our Hills birthright trips have been vandalized and stolen, and I can't count how many times I've been stared at or received jeers of Free Palestine simply because I'm visibly Jewish and Israeli. This is not normal. Jewish students should not have to deal with constant attacks on who they are. No student, no matter their identity, should either. The problem we face is this. When anti-Semitism ensues on our campus, many students do not know where to turn. Unaware of the protections Title VI affords them, they get lost in bureaucracy and struggle to access resources. Incidents go unreported, perpetrators aren't held accountable, and hate continues to go unchecked. By designating a central, specialized person students can turn to when incidents of hate, no matter how big or small, happen, this legislation can help stop the cycle. I urge you to take a strong stand against hate of any kind and vote yes on this bill. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. My name is Nava Goldstein, and I am a Jewish student at the University of Maryland. First off, I want to thank Chairman Barnes, the committee, and especially Delegate Joe Vogel for your leadership in introducing Bill 86, which I am strongly in support of here today. As a student at the University of Maryland, I have personally felt the discomfort, anxiety, and isolation that has come with the recent increase of anti-Semitism on college campuses. In fact, on my first day of classes this year, I encountered a large sign on our campus lawn that read, "From the river to the sea, Palestine is almost free," a slogan widely seen among my community as an anti-Semitic call for violence against Jews. The very next day, I saw a sticker on one of my classmates' laptops that read, "Zionist donors and trustees, hands off our campus." Again, another harmful stereotype implying malicious meddling of rich Jews on our campus. Sometime later, I observed an October 7th vigil hosted by Students for Justice in Palestine, I walked in and immediately heard 2 students behind me talking about me, whispering, "I can't believe they let the Zionists in," talking about me and my friend. I was wearing a sweatshirt with Hebrew on it. These are only just a few examples. While I heard reporting these incidences might affect my relations or complicate my campus life, the lack of an accessible resource for me to turn to ultimately drove my decision to stay silent. I should have spoken up. The truth is, I failed to take action, and I do regret that. This Bill 86 would change that. By designating a Title VI coordinator, this bill would create necessary accessible channels for Jewish students like myself to report discrimination and anti-Semitism. Most importantly, this bill would encourage us to seek times and support where we feel targeted and vulnerable. Thank you again for your time and for considering this important legislation, which could truly make an impact on our student community in Maryland. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just add one quick thing here? There's also testimony from Strong Schools Maryland, Free State Justice, and Maryland Latinos Unidos showing the coalition here. And as you'll see in the fiscal note, there is no cost to the state because a Title VI coordinator can be designated as an existing professional at the school already.
Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Vogel, for presenting this bill. The only question I have is that obviously we do have data speaking to the fact that there are reports. Can you just help explain how are people reporting what's happening?
There's a number of different ways thank you, Delegate, for the question. There's a number of different ways that reports can be handled now or that cases can be reported, and I'll turn it over to Meredith here in a second as well. In the case of school districts, right, you can either go to the state superintendent, you can go to someone that currently might be within the school system, same thing with a college. The point here is that we're making it very clear. There is one person, a Title VI coordinator, who you can raise these concerns to, raise these complaints to, and they can be responsible for tracking and be that point of contact as you're navigating the process of filing that report and the aftermath of it as well.
I would just add, a lot of times students actually call us or call various other organizations, and we have to help them navigate it and then figure out. A lot of schools have a Title IX coordinator. They don't realize that, and some of the Title IX coordinators, and it's not their fault, don't realize they should be covering some of the Title VI incidents as well. So there's a little bit of confusion there. And sometimes students, they're just, the way they're describing things, the professionals that are working on it, so we've heard students referred to mental health services saying that this is not necessarily bias and discrimination. It's not really under Title IX. We're not sure where it fits. So there's a lot of confusion. And in the K through 12 spaces, because we have UMD students, I will just add, and I have a college student and I have a K through 12 kid. I have a kid who's in college and I have a kid who's a junior in high school. And right now, even the K through 12 spaces, they have hate bias coordinators, but it's also still not exactly clear. This would be very specific, and Maryland would be one of the first in the state that would take this on. Other states are starting to look at this and are looking at this model legislation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I had an opportunity to go to the seminar that we had in Harford County that was put on by the Attorney General's office and different experts regarding the hate bias. I don't know if what's going on is hate bias, but I would say it's hate bias, if you're hassling other folks of a different nationality or religious affiliation. So what I'm wondering is you may want to, there's no sense reinventing all these different wheels if the AG would be willing to deal with it, because I think they have a dedicated phone line to it, and I mean that the governor wanted that kind of stuff being tracked. That being said, even if you want to have your own Title VI thing for the college campuses, you may want to just talk to them to make sure that that you can kind of plug in this information, so that we get a total picture of what's going on in society. I just, I think that they're on it with what they're doing, because they brought the police, they brought the mother that lost her son at College Park. I mean, they really were, it was a very inclusive thing, and they had a lot of different people there. So just a thought. The other part of this is, okay, you've got the reporting of it and the students, but there also needs to be kind of a reconciliation because the kids, everybody's going to the same institution. And I think that, if that's possible, I don't know. I mean, but just a thought.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question, Delegate, or the comment. I have just some feedback. So what I would say is what the AG's office is working on, which we have worked on with him. I've been at a couple of those forums also. That's on a larger scale of hate and bias throughout the entire state. Title VI is really specific to the schools and to the education system. So it is something that really should be separate. Now, there should be potentially coordination without question with the AG's office, maybe making sure those incidents are reported up, but they're not always, and so it is there is a little bit of a distinction here between the two. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Ways and Means is with us. Did we introduce you all when you? All right. How y'all doing? Good, thanks. Somebody's got a question? Okay, thanks for being here.
Love
Good
no
to see you,
questions.
Delegate. I don't see any more questions for this panel, but we do have another panel. So thank you for the delegate for the bill and for this panel. We also have Kenzie Funk, Ethan Zitter, Julia Jassy, Lauren Pruitt, and we have one oral, so virtual. All virtual. Okay, let's pull them up. Okay, welcome. 2 minutes.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay. Chair Barnes, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I also want to thank Delegate Joe Vogel for introducing this critical legislation and being such a strong advocate for Maryland students. My name is Mia Mikowski. I'm a student at the University of Maryland, and I'm here to speak in support of Bill HB 86. After experiencing multiple incidents of anti-Semitism firsthand, I understand the necessity of a Title VI officer on campuses everywhere, and I urge you to support this legislation. Before I was a student at Maryland, I was a student at Northwestern University, a school that made national news for the way it handled anti-Semitism on campus. Today, I would like to share one instance of hostility that was so poorly handled by the university, it was a major contribution to my decision to transfer. 2 days after October 7th, I arrived at my lecture prepared to discuss the weekend's readings and relearn the class topic. Instead of focusing on topics relevant to the class, however, our professor divulged into a 45-minute rant where he repeated multiple times and very clearly stated, "Be careful who you label a terrorist." A week later, my TA canceled her mandatory discussion section to, quote, "condemn the genocide in Gaza and the repressive state of terror." At the time, instead of addressing these issues, when I complained, the university referred me and many others to mental health services. It was only after I unenrolled in the university in July that I was invited to open a Title VI investigation. As astonished as I was with my professor's anti-Semitic rhetoric, I ultimately left Northwestern because the university failed to protect my dignity as a student and address the hostile environment I experienced. While I have not faced such egregious incidents at UMD, I believe that designating a Title VI coordinator ensures that even if, God forbid, instances of discrimination occur on campus, someone in the administration knows how to address them beyond referring students to mental counseling. Let's keep UMD in the news for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. Vote yes on HB 86.
Thank you, Mia. Thanks for your testimony and lending your voice to this. Sorry for what you've experienced, but we're happy to have you in Maryland. Any questions? Okay, thanks. Who's next? Okay. All right, Julia? Julia, your microphone and video is off, so we're going to move on to the next person. If you turn them on, all right, there you go. Julia, you have 2 minutes. Thank you,
Hi.
2 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Delegate Vogel for having me speak today and for introducing this important piece of legislation. Thank you to Chair Delegate Barnes, Vice Chair Delegate Chang, members of the Appropriations Committee. I appreciate this committee's time and efforts to supporting students on campus. My name is Julia Jassy, and I am the CEO and co-founder of Jewish on Campus, a student-powered 501c3 nonprofit organization combating campus anti-Semitism nationwide. For nearly 5 years, we've served as the leading voice speaking for Gen Z Jews in Maryland and throughout the United States, advocating for Jewish students on all levels from Campus Quad to Capitol Hill. Jewish on Campus strongly urges you to support Bill 86 for Title VI coordinators at Maryland universities. A recent survey from the Anti-Defamation League, Hillel International, and College Pulse found that 83% of Jewish college students have experienced or witnessed anti-Semitism on campus since October 7th, 2023. While Jewish students have reported rising incidents of anti-Semitism on campus, they lack a straightforward and efficient process to access support from university administrators. Bill 86 requires all Maryland colleges and universities to designate a Title VI coordinator, ensuring compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits race, color, and national origin discrimination in federally funded programs. Since 2020, Jewish on Campus has filed 4 Title VI complaints with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. Representing Jewish students across the country, we personally recognize the urgent need to ensure consistent enforcement of federal protections under Title VI nationwide. Bill 86 provides a clear contact for Maryland students experiencing national origin discrimination, including anti-Semitism. If passed, Maryland would become a leading state to ensure university administrations are held accountable for providing safe and inclusive environments for all students on campus. We urge you to vote yes on Bill 86. Thank you once again to Delegate Bogle for your powerful voice for students in Maryland, and thank you for your considering of this bill.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Jassy, for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Thank you very much. We'll have the next witness come up. Thank you very much for being here, Lauren Pruitt. If you could provide your testimony in 2 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Pruitt, and I serve as the legal director at Free State Justice, a nonprofit organization committed to serving LGBTQ+ individuals in Maryland. HB 86 addresses a significant aspect of compliance with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, impacting students throughout the state. The appointment of Title VI coordinators will serve as a vital accountability measure for educational institutions, which often present hostile environments for LGBTQ+ students. It is critical that these coordinators advocate for necessary changes and foster inclusivity, thereby creating an atmosphere in which all students feel valued and respected. Title VI coordinators may identify and address existing and potential barriers within educational institutions that disproportionately affect LGBTQ+ students, especially those students of color and ethnic minorities. By eliminating obstacles to education, students will be able to concentrate on their studies, resulting in improved job prospects and increased income potential. This legislation is essential for addressing and preventing discrimination within Maryland's educational institutions and mitigating harm to vulnerable populations. By enhancing accessibility to Title VI coordinators and facilitating the filing of Title VI complaints, students will be more inclined to seek support for discriminatory experiences, contributing to a more hopeful and optimistic future for all. As an advocate, I've personally observed the challenges that unequal access to education poses for LGBTQ+ students. A deficiency of support from marginalized communities facing discrimination can lead to their disengagement from educational institutions, thereby limiting their opportunities for upward mobility. By mandating the designation of Title VI coordinators in all educational institutions, Maryland will take a significant step toward dismantling institutional discrimination and promoting equitable access to education for all students. I strongly urge the committee to issue a favorable report for HB 86. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Thank you very much. Have a great day. It looks like we have one more virtual witness listed. Herschel Barnstein. Herschel Barnstein, thank you very much for being here. Please provide your testimony in 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, members of the Appropriations Committee and members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Herschel Barnstein, and I'm here on behalf of Jewish Voice for Peace at the University of Maryland to support HB 86 with amendments. Let me begin by stating unequivocally that we support the bill's intent to ensure civil rights are respected and that no student faces discrimination for their race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin. I have no doubt Title VI coordinators on campuses would be highly effective in that goal. However, we have major concerns the language of the bill could be weaponized to suppress student speech. In other states, non-discrimination has been weaponized in this way. Furthermore, on my own college campus, the school administration falsely accuses groups of anti-Semitism in order to target them. I believe it was said here previously that the Students for Justice at Palestine held a vigil at the University of Maryland. And I'm of course referring to the University of Maryland College Park. That vigil, which keep in mind was to honor the lives of 186,000 Palestinians who had been killed in Gaza, was only held after the school tried to cancel it and SJP had to sue them in a federal court. So this conflation of anti-Semitism with legitimate political positions does nothing to make us safer as Jews or to advance civil rights in Maryland. Therefore, the bill should be amended to include protections for students that ensure it isn't misused to silence our speech. It's important to ensure civil rights offices don't become vehicles for repressive policies. And to remind, I support the favorable position of this bill with amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herschel, for your testimony. Are there any questions from members of the committee for Herschel Barnstein? Great, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. That concludes the bill hearing for House Bill 86. And on behalf of Appropriations Committee Chair Barnes, thank you very much for everyone for being part of this bill hearing. Have a great day. Thanks.